Mark had always believed that Italy would fix them. He and Claire had been married for 8 years, their life in New York a blur of work, bills, and the kind of routine that dulls even the strongest love. They'd met in college, two kids from upstate who dreamed big, Mark in finance, Claire in marketing. Back then, they'd stay up all night talking about traveling the world, sketching out plans for Paris, Tokyo, Rome. But life got in the way. Promotions, a mortgage on their Brooklyn brownstone, endless commutes. They still loved each other, but the spark had faded, replaced by comfortable familiarity. So when Claire suggested a 2-week trip to Italy to find each other again, Mark jumped at the chance. He pictured them wandering cobblestone streets, sharing gelato, laughing like they used to. He didn't picture her lips on another man's in a shadowy Venetian alley. The trip started like a dream. They landed in Rome, jet-lagged but giddy, and spent days exploring the Colosseum, tossing coins into the Trevi Fountain, eating carbonara and tiny trattorias. Claire was radiant, her dark hair catching the sunlight, her laughter louder than it had been in years. Mark felt like he was falling in love with her all over again. They moved on to Florence, where they marveled at the Duomo and got tipsy on Chianti in a hillside vineyard. By the time they reached Venice, the final stop, Mark was sure they'd turned a corner. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and they were rebuilding it, brick by brick. Venice was everything they'd imagined. Canals shimmering under golden light, gondolas gliding silently, the air heavy with salt and history. They checked into a boutique hotel near Piazza San Marco, a converted palazzo with creaking floors and views of the Grand Canal. That first night, they made love with an urgency they hadn't felt in years, the sounds of the city drifting through the open window. Mark fell asleep with Claire in his arms, thinking this was what they'd been missing. The next day, they wandered the city without a plan, getting lost in narrow streets, crossing bridges barely wide enough for two. Claire wanted to see the Rialto market, so they headed there in the morning, weaving through stalls of fresh fish and ripe figs. Mark noticed her lingering at a stand selling handmade sketchbooks, her fingers tracing the leather covers. "You should get one," he said, nudging her. Claire had always loved drawing, though she hadn't picked up a pencil in years. She smiled, a little wistful, and bought a small one, tucking it into her bag. They split up after lunch. Claire wanted to check out an art gallery she'd read about, while Mark was drawn to a maritime museum near the Arsenale. "Meet me at the hotel at 6?" she asked, kissing him lightly. He nodded, watching her disappear into the crowd, her sundress swaying with each step. He spent the afternoon learning about Venice's naval history, his mind half on Claire, imagining her sketching in some quiet corner of the city. By 5, he was restless, so he decided to head back early, maybe surprise her with a bottle of Prosecco. He was crossing a small bridge near Campo San Polo when he saw her. At first, he wasn't sure it was Claire. The woman's back was to him, her hair loose, her body pressed close to a man he didn't recognize. But then she turned slightly, and the curve of her jaw, the way she tilted her head, hit him like a punch. It was Claire, and she was kissing this man, her hands on his shoulders, his arms around her waist. They were tucked into a narrow alley, half hidden by shadows, but Mark saw everything, the way her body leaned into his, the softness of her movements, like she'd done this before. He froze, his heart pounding so loud he thought they'd hear it. Part of him wanted to charge over, pull them apart, demand answers, but his feet wouldn't move. He stood there, a tourist with a museum map in one hand, watching his wife kiss a stranger. When they finally broke apart, the man said something in Italian, his voice low, and Claire laughed, touching his cheek. Then they walked off, hand in hand, disappearing around a corner. Mark didn't follow. He couldn't. He stumbled back to the hotel, his mind a mess of rage and disbelief. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the canal outside, replaying the scene until it felt unreal, like a movie he'd accidentally walked into. When Claire walked in at 6, her face flushed, her bag slung over her shoulder, he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. "Hey, you're early," she said, smiling. "The gallery was amazing. How was the museum?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, searching for some sign of guilt, a crack in her composure. "Who is he?" he asked finally, his voice flat. Claire's smile faltered. Who's who? The guy you were kissing. In the alley near San Polo. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she sank onto the bed, covering her face with her hands. Oh God, Mark, you saw that? Yeah, I saw it, he said, his voice rising. What the hell, Claire? We're here to fix our marriage, and you're making out with some random guy? It's not what you think, she said, looking up, her eyes wet. His name's Luca. He's an artist. I met him at the gallery today, and we got talking, and I don't know, it just happened. It was a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. A mistake? Mark laughed, bitter. You were holding his hand. You laughed like you were in love. That's not a mistake, Claire. That's a choice. She reached for him, but he pulled away, standing by the window, needing distance. She started crying, her words tumbling out, how she'd been feeling lost, how the trip had been perfect but also overwhelming, how Luca had been charming, flattering, a momentary escape. It was one kiss, she said. I swear, Mark, I love you. I don't want to lose you over this. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to chalk it up to too much wine, the romance of Venice, a fleeting lapse. But something in her voice, too rehearsed, too polished, made him pause. Give me your phone, he said. Claire hesitated, then handed it over, her hands shaking. He scrolled through her texts, ignoring her protests. There, under the name L, were messages going back weeks. Can't wait to see you in Venice. Your sketches are beautiful. You have a gift. Meet me at the gallery. I'll show you my studio. They weren't explicit, but they were intimate, planned. This wasn't a spontaneous kiss. She'd known Luca before they even left New York. You lied, he said, tossing the phone onto the bed. You've been talking to him for weeks. You planned this. It's not like that, she said, her voice desperate. He's just a friend. We connected over art. I started sketching again, and he's been helping me. It's not an affair, Mark. It's emotional, I guess, but not physical. That kiss was the first time anything happened. Emotional, he stared at her, incredulous. You're texting some guy behind my back, meeting him in secret, and you think that's not an affair? What else are you hiding? She didn't answer, and that silence told him everything. He grabbed his jacket and left, ignoring her calls to come back. He walked through Venice's twisting streets, the beauty of the city now mocking him. Gondoliers sang, tourists laughed, and he felt like he was drowning. He ended up at a bar near the Rialto, nursing a whiskey, trying to figure out what to do. Divorce her? Forgive her? He didn't even know who she was anymore. The next morning, Claire was quiet, her eyes red from crying. She tried to talk, but he cut her off. I need to know everything, he said. No more lies. She nodded, and over coffee in their hotel room, she told him about Luca. He was a painter, mid-30s, with a studio in Dorsoduro. She'd found his work online months ago when she started drawing again as a way to cope with stress. They'd started emailing about art, then texting, then everything else. She admitted she'd taken private art lessons with him via Zoom, arranged to meet him in Venice, that she'd been flattered by his attention. They wasn't planning to kiss him, she said. But being around him, it made me feel like the old Claire again. The one who dreamed of being an artist. Mark listened, but her words felt like excuses. He couldn't shake the image of her with Luca, the ease of it, the betrayal. He decided to find Luca himself. He told Claire he needed space and left, using the gallery's website to track down Luca's studio. It was a small space above a bookshop filled with canvases of bold, abstract landscapes. Luca was there, a lean man with dark curls and paint-splattered hands. He looked up when Mark walked in, his face guarded. You, Luca? Mark asked. The man nodded, setting down a brush. You must be Mark. The fact that he knew his name was another blow. Mark clenched his fists, resisting the urge to swing. What's going on with you and my wife? He said, his voice steady. Luca sighed, gesturing to a stool. Please sit, I don't want trouble. His English was accented, careful. He said that Claire had met her at the gallery event in New York where he'd been showing his work. They'd been drawn together by art, he said, by her talent and passion. She's gifted, he said, but she's trapped. She doesn't believe in herself. I wanted to help her. Help her? Mark snapped. By kissing her? By texting her behind my back? Luca looked away, his jaw tight. The kiss was a mistake. I care for her, yes, but I know she's married. I told her we could only be friends. She struggles with that. Mark didn't know what to believe. Luca seemed sincere, but so had Claire at first. He left the studio with a sketch Luca gave him, one of Claire's, a detailed pencil study of a Venetian canal. It was beautiful, and that hurt more than anything. She'd poured herself into this, into Luca's world, while he'd been planning their future. Back at the hotel, Claire was waiting, her bag still unpacked, like she was afraid to assume she could stay. They talked for hours, laying bare their marriage, the distance, the unspoken resentments, the ways they'd both let it slip away. Claire admitted she'd been unhappy, not just with Mark, but with herself, and that Luca had filled a void she didn't know how to name. I don't want to lose you, she said, her voice breaking. I'll do whatever it takes, counseling, anything. Mark wanted to believe her, but trust was a hard thing to rebuild. He thought about the life they'd built, the years they'd invested, the way she'd looked at him in Rome, like he was still her home. But he also thought about the secrets she'd kept, the ease with which she'd lied. They had 3 days left in Venice and then a flight back to New York. Part of him wanted to walk away, to disappear into this foreign city and start over. But running wouldn't fix what was broken. He didn't make a decision that night or the next. They stayed in Venice, moving through the city like strangers sharing a space, each grappling with their own pain. Mark watched Claire as she sketched by the canal one morning, her pencil moving with a confidence he hadn't seen in years. He wondered if he could find a way back to each other, or if the kiss in the alley had shattered something that couldn't be repaired. The choice was his: stay and fight for their marriage, or walk away and rebuild alone. As the sun set over the lagoon, casting Venice in a golden glow, Mark realized he wasn't ready to let go. Not yet, but he also knew that love alone wouldn't be enough. It would take work, honesty, and a willingness to forgive, not just Claire, but himself.